Alright, so let's start. The first national interest priority is economic security. No, it's okay, I've got it. And we know with the national interest, we can remember back to what John Anderson said, what's the first priority of a state? Security. Secondly, he said it was economic security or economic stability. You can see from this first graph, Indonesia's economic security is looking pretty good. Its period of economic growth in the last 8 years is phenomenal. It's unmatched. It's only matched by only a few other states like China, Brazil, India, and a couple of others. In contrast, you can look at GDP growth for Europe. So this is the Eurozone 27, the 15 biggest European nations, and Spain. It's shrinking. No, it's not up yet. No, I've put up. So you can contrast those two. Why would that do that now? Indonesia, massive economic growth, like parts of Asia. The rest of Europe in economic decline. This is that global power shift that we were hearing about from John Anderson. Context. So, the background to this. Brutal, anti-democratic, anti-communist, undemocratic Suharto. So right up until 98, you had a different type of Indonesia. The world wasn't willing to trade with it. You wouldn't take your business there because you wouldn't know what would happen to your business.
How is he anti-communist?
Yes. So he didn't like communist parties. So communism is a particular belief.
Yeah.
So Hitler was also anti-democratic, anti-communist. Sorry,
Right.
he was a dictator. You've got the pre-2000 struggles. But you've got this ongoing shift away from Europe towards Asia. You can see the diagram down here. Forecast GDP growth. US, fairly small growth. In fact, if we had European states here, they would be negative small, you know what I mean? They'd be in decline. ASEAN, average of 5.5% growth. India 7.5%, China 9%. So you can see the growth is coming from Asia in recent times. And they're certainly propping up Australia by buying all of our resources. So this is the background to their economic growth. That table needs to be dragged onto the screen. Alright, so why pursue economic security? So why is this in Indonesia's national interest? One reason, they've had economic challenges pre-2000. So they need to do something. They need to take action. So the state has to use some sort of foreign policy instrument, to use the terms in our course. All states have to take action to achieve a goal. It's in its interest to pursue growth. It wants foreign direct investment. So the world is globalised. Money is moving around rapidly, but it's not moving everywhere. It's not going to places that are unstable. The money's not going to Africa, and it's not going to low developed areas of instability. So if you want foreign direct investment to flow, if you want Australian mining companies to invest in your resources, you need to stabilise your country. You need to get rid of corruption. You need to be appealing to investors. They've got stability in recent times through low unemployment, massive population, so you've got domestic consumption. However, there are still many people in poverty, and it's one of the largest economies in Asia. So these are some of the reasons why it's in their interest to pursue, it's in every state's interest to pursue economic security. And the following graph captures some of that. This compares the GDP, the gross domestic product. So if you take all of the goods and services produced in 1 year, that's your GDP. Indonesia, by far the largest in Southeast Asia, Malaysia a little further down, Vietnam, Cambodia. You can see the difference between what Cambodia can produce in terms of GDP. I imagine most of this is tourism and rice, versus Indonesia. Huge difference. I think the second one is Brunei, but I might be wrong. Comparison of Asia. Alright. So what has Indonesia done to achieve this? So when you're actually talking about what a state can do, the next 3 slides are broken up into these 3 areas. Bilateral ties. It has gone out of its way to form ties with Australia. Bilateral, 2 states working together. It's also pursued multilateral ties or multilateral relations. So multilateral, many states working together, 3 or more. And finally, where there are threats to its economic interests, like separatist groups, it's suppressed those threats. So let's look at each one in detail. So 3 things: bilateral ties with Australia, multilateral ties with Asia, suppressing separatist groups. All 3 are on the next 3 slides. There's 1 slide on each. Okay, so bilateral ties with Australia. It's used diplomacy. You can see on our board, there are 4 foreign policy instruments that a state can use. One of them is diplomacy. And we've got some examples of this diplomacy. The Australian-Indonesian Business Council. A group of business leaders, trade ministers, they meet. They aim to deepen links, to connect people together, to connect businesses. You want to buy beef, we'll connect you to our beef farmers. We want to sell concrete. Where are your businesses that want to buy concrete? You connect business groups. The second one, trade ministers meeting. Very high level dialogue between our most senior economic officials and their most senior economic officials. It's bilateral, Australian and Indonesian officials meeting. And the third one, the Cairns Group, aims to increase liberalisation in trade and agricultural products. So you've got 3 examples there of diplomacy in action, of Indonesia using diplomacy to secure its economic security, and all of them are bilateral. They're Australia and Indonesia. The results of these bilateral ties have been positive. We export a huge amount of agricultural products to Indonesia. You might remember last year that we put a ban on the live cattle trade. So our cows being sent to Indonesia alive and then being slaughtered in Indonesia. And that was really controversial for us to stop our live cattle being sent to Indonesia. It's a huge trade. We also have over 30 companies that have mines in Indonesia. We're very good at mining. We've got highly skilled engineers, geologists, and we've got a lot of wealth, so investment money. So Australian companies are really active in Indonesia. All of these things are possible because at a government level, the 2 governments are working together bilaterally to strengthen both their economies. So this is a summary of our bilateral economic ties. This is what Indonesia has done.
What's the actual white paper?
That's the source. I put that there because that was a reminder for me where I got it from. It's a document released by government talking about how Asia is the future for Australia, and that was one of the examples it had in the document. Secondly, in order to be strong economically, it pursues multilateral relations. So many states. And we've got 2 examples. We know one of them. We know ASEAN. But there's also APEC. So it's a forum for 21 states to meet together to promote free trade and economic cooperation. And hopefully this video will work. We'll give it a second.
is getting smaller. People, businesses, and economies grow closer together. At APEC, we imagine possibilities when there is dialogue and cooperation. When diverse communities work together through trade, good things can happen. More choices for consumers, more business opportunities, more jobs, and better standards of living for all. At APEC, we make this a reality by advancing free trade for Asia-Pacific prosperity. Established in 1989 with 12 economies, APEC's membership now totals 21. Recognizing the pace of implementation to differing levels of economic development, APEC leaders in Bobo, Indonesia committed in 1994 to achieve the goal of free and open trade and investment in the Asia-Pacific no later than 2020. This is the fundamental commitment that shapes most of what we do. So how have we set about achieving these goals? Through three broad work areas: trade and investment liberalization, business facilitation, and economic and technical cooperation, also known as APEC 3 pillars. The first pillar, trade and investment liberalization, focuses on opening up markets and integrating economies in the region. The second, business facilitation, aims to improve the ease of doing business and reduce trading costs across economies. The third, economic and technical cooperation, enables businesses to take advantage of global trade in a sustainable way.
If you could take one word from our first area of study and use that word to describe what's happening here, what word is it? G. Yeah, this whole APEC thing, this initiative, is an example of globalisation. Political globalisation, economic globalisation. So you've got many actors coming together, free trade, connecting businesses, connecting trade, making things more efficient. This is an example of globalisation.
APEC helps the transition towards regional economic integration by ensuring that people are well placed to gain from global trade in the long term. From helping small businesses get loans and access foreign markets, to educating youth in the use of information technology, and empowering women to play a bigger role in APEC economies. A tough challenge, sure, but consider this. There have been significant reductions in average tariffs in APEC over the past 20 years. Trade facilitation, which makes it easier, cheaper, and faster to trade across borders, has also saved businesses billions of dollars with initiatives like simplifying customs procedures and making it quicker for business people to travel with the APEC Business Travel Card. Structural reform makes doing business easier and helps ensure higher quality growth across the APEC region by promoting competition and developing stronger social safety nets. APEC's work on reducing tariffs positively impacts trade and investment and overall.
We get the idea. APEC, good. So, it's multilateral. 21 states along the Asian Rim or the Asian Pacific Rim working together, free trade, trade liberalisation. And you've got two quotes here. The second one is from Yudhoyono. It says, on one hand, Indonesia will benefit from your investments and collaboration. On the other hand, your investment and returns will also grow. So this was him speaking at last year's APEC meeting, trying to encourage the other business leaders there, the other states, to invest in Indonesia. He's saying, help us grow and we will help give you a return on your investment. So he's trying to use APEC to grow his own state's economy to secure economic security and the national interest. That's APEC. The other one is ASEAN. Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Indonesia's in a good position. It's got a dominant status. It's got the largest population. It's got the best growth rates. It's the only democracy. It's the biggest economy in ASEAN. So that gives it a dominant position in ASEAN. And as a part of ASEAN, you've got free trade agreements with many states. So there's it's the AANZ FTA, Australian, ASEAN, New Zealand Free Trade Agreement. And that exists, that's been negotiated with an ASEAN. But again, reducing tariffs, free trade.
Did you say it's the largest economy?
Indonesia is the largest economy in ASEAN, yes. So these are two examples of multilateral efforts. Indonesia working with many states. Because it doesn't have to do these things. Now, the alternative would be for it to isolate itself, to go it alone, to not mix with other groups. But instead, it's decided to pursue a multilateral path to economic growth. So that's the second thing it's done. Again, predominantly diplomatic. States working with other states. Oh, and the cool tops. Yeah, you have to see these. Every APEC meeting, the host nation creates these weird outfits that are typical of the state. So here's one.
What was the one where they had Julia Gillard from Austria?
Here's one, nice and bright. Doesn't come up well on your screen. This was Mexico. Of course, they have to have what are they called? Ponchos. And Australia, we're so embarrassing. The water parka.
Yeah, the dries of
ones.
Doesn't anybody remember when this was on Motion?
And it was probably a 40-degree day in Sydney. It's pretty fun. The third thing, and the third thing is much different than the other two. I've chosen this one intentionally because this isn't about diplomatic power. For Indonesia to secure its territory, its economic assets, it also has to use military power. So we've got West Papuans in the West Papuan region. They want independence, they want that region. We know it's full of resources. It's full of resources like the Grasberg mine, which we know returns over $3 billion to the state.
Yeah, what's this part of?
This is the third thing that Indonesia does to secure its economic security.
What was the pressing?
Yeah, I've retitled the topic. I took away this. It was too long. Retitled Protecting Economic Growth. Look, it's the same thing.
Okay.
What are they doing to protect their economic assets? They're suppressing separatist groups. They're protecting the resources. So in this case, you've got the Grasberg mine, you've got crazy West Papuans in inverted commas who want independence. So Indonesia sends in the military, it sends in the troops. It deploys large numbers of troops to the West Papuan region, mostly to protect assets like mines. So to secure the economic interest of the state, it uses military power. And it allows Rio Tinto to hire the military, something you don't see in most democratic nations. Australians can't hire a squadron of SAS troops. You can't park a tank outside the school on the night of a formal or muck-up day. But Rio Tinto, perhaps because of how significant it is for the state, this goes to the power of a TNC, is allowed to hire troops, and according to Rio Tinto's own documents, it spent $1.6 million on 1,850 troops in 2008. So they've admitted, they've said outright, this isn't conspiracy theory stuff. They said, we spent this much money hiring their military to protect the mine. So this is a different type of power, a different instrument being used to secure the national interest. It's not soft power diplomacy anymore. This is hard power, this is military power. There's a threat to our economic national interest. We've done what we can diplomatically. We've got separatists inside our territory. We need to knock them down. Foreign policy instruments. I'm going to start referring to it as FPI. Foreign policy instruments.
Like investment or instruments?
Foreign policy instruments. So they're instruments or tools the state can use.
Rio Tinto like shoot the West
Rio Tinto can't, but the troops can, and the troops do. They fight back and forth. Well, the West Papuans also shoot there. To be fair, both sides are shooting each other. It's dangerous.
So like Rio Tinto's higher than technically like.
Yeah. I mean, according to our rules, yes.
But not according to.
No.
Okay.
No, because the government is letting Rio Tinto hide them. They want it to be a secure, safe mine. I love these pictures too. I mean, it's literally a massive hole in the ground. That's the most profitable mine on the planet. Look at the size of that truck. I reckon that's pretty cool. On a side note, I had a friend who didn't finish year 12. He tried being a musician and a busker and a couple of other things. He ended up learning, he did like an introductory mechanics course and he earned $150,000 a year changing those tyres in Western Australia. That's pretty good money for changing tyres and dropping out in year 10 or 11.
Yeah, but look at those tyres. If they fail, you die.
Yeah. So, we've got several examples of power.
Wait, isn't this only going through one national interest, right?
Yep, this is just one, we're still on the, yes. We've got several examples of power being used. Economic power. By having a free trade agreement, you're in an advantageous position. That's a form of economic power. The size of Indonesia's economy is an example of its economic power. 15th biggest in the world, Australia 18th. It depends which measurement you use. Some measurements have the two reversed, but it's top 20. It's always top 20 in the world. And its GDP growth gives it more power in ASEAN. It's in a better position to negotiate. So it's a strong economic power. It uses diplomatic power. That's a big one. So multilaterally, working with APEC and ASEAN, that's an example of diplomatic power. Working bilaterally with Australia. So when two trade ministers meet, that's diplomacy. When we send delegates to Indonesia to meet on refugees or on anything, that's diplomacy. And both of our states like free trade because it means there's going to be more trade between our two states. We're geographically close to them, that makes trade cheaper. We're better off selling our coal to Indonesia than selling our coal to Japan if they're willing to pay the same price because it's closer. And these two states work together diplomatically to encourage foreign direct investment. They want our investment to help them develop their mines. They don't have the technical expertise, so they're happy for us to invest in them. They invest in us in a big way. What way is that? Indonesians spend a huge amount of money in Australia on one particular, well, several things. One's agriculture, but there's another one. Education. Yeah, massive numbers of Indonesian students come here. Some in the secondary years, but mostly university level. We've got many of the best universities in the world. So they come here to study. That's a form of investment. Our third biggest export is education.
Do we do that on the economic power?
That's about Australia, so you can't really do that. Stick to Indonesia. Whoa. Okay. And thirdly, it uses military power. Deploys troops to protect the mine. So several different types of power used to protect the economic interest. I don't know what this shows. GDP growth. The other benefit of GDP growth is the more money you have, the more money you can spend on the military. So this graph tracks those two trends. GDP growth in ASEAN, so this is about ASEAN, and military expenditure. And you can see they're both moving together. So if you can secure the state's finances and economy, then you can also secure the state militarily because you can spend more money on defence. And many people argue the first national interest priority, the most important one is secure borders, a secure state. Okay, a summary of foreign policy instruments. And I've realised this last one isn't correct. This is what got us in trouble last year. Let's see if anyone can pick up on why we can't have anything there for foreign policy instruments under military power. very close, very close. Has to be foreign. Foreign means outside of the state. So you can't talk about Indonesia using military power as a foreign policy instrument unless it's with another state.
What's this?
But isn't Rio Tinto like an Australian company?
Foreign policy.
Like if trades are done with two countries.
Yes, so what you'd have to say is hiring, hang on, allowing foreign TNCs to hire Indonesian military personnel. Yeah. Because this was a mistake that happened with most students in last year's exam, including ours, that when they got a question on foreign, there was a question about using the military and foreign policy, and almost all of my class used the military inside the country to suppress West Papuans. And that hurt them because it's not foreign. It's an example of military power, but the question wasn't about military power. It was about foreign policy. So if you get a question about military power, yes, you can talk about deploying troops to West Papua. If you get a question about foreign policy, it has to be something that Indonesia is doing with another state or something outside of the state. So that's a better one, allowing foreign TNCs to hire the military, trade and diplomacy. But remember, with any one of them, you've got to talk about the foreign implications. So diplomacy with Australia, here's an example, give us some detail.
Wait, so give detail the result of the foreign policy or what happened to the foreign policy?
We're going to do some questions. We're going to lay out how to order them. In fact, that might be the next slide. We're almost done. Ah, yes, questions. It's a bit of a joke. Palm oil. There's controversy around palm oil. I'm just going to have to be blunter in some of these cartoons. 2.1. We're going to do the same thing we did with Area Study 1. Palm oil, like sugar.
So they're producing themselves and letting his life go
Yeah.